iTunes. The Progressive Radio Network is moving forward, and we hope you are coming with us.
Hi, this is Professor T. Love of A Bowl of Soul, a mixed stew of soul music. Come get your history lesson in soul music on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Tune in as I play soul music from 1949 to the present. Also, listen to A Bowl of Soul in the archives. If you like A Bowl of Soul, rate us in iTunes. Come and catch a groove on A Bowl of Soul. The Progressive Radio Network is moving forward, and we hope you're coming with us.
At last, an alternative to the ravings of right-wing radio. The Bert Cohen Show digs down to give you the hidden truths behind the stories that affect us all. I'm Bert Cohen, and I make full use of over 40 years of experience as an anti-war activist, political columnist, and 7 terms as state senator in conservative New Hampshire to uncover the real stories behind today's headlines. Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time at prn.fm. If you miss a show, you can check it out on the archives. And if you like the show, rate us on iTunes. The Progressive Radio Network is moving forward, and we hope you're coming with us.
Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today we are going to be focusing this roundtable on health and healing. And it makes perfect sense that we would start with Mozart, as we usually do, because that's one of the most healing pieces of music that any of us know. And in fact, some major healing has occurred simply through the listening to and the feeling of music. And no doubt that'll be something that we touch upon today as well as we go around, because after all, one of the people we have on our panel is a musician, in addition to being a chiropractor and a nutritionist. And that's Dr. Rona Allen, directly to my left, who's been in practice in New York for some 21, 22 years. She is the former director of the Soho Health and Wellness Center. And there, she, of course, did chiropractic with people, nutritional counseling. There was an acupuncturist there, massage therapy, colonics, spa services, and the like. It was a very well-known healing center down in Soho for many years. In fact, that's where we met many years ago. And she has been very much on the cutting edge of healing in the New York area for decades. She was featured on World News Tonight with Tom Brokaw and Soledad O'Brien. She's been interviewed by Robin Strasser regarding menopause and alternatives that women can follow. Additionally, Dr. Allen, has toured, I should say, for some 6 years with The Who, and many of her clients have been really well-known jazz and rock musicians over the course of the years. Mary Wilson of the Supremes, many actors and well-known musicians, and she's been in that world both as a healer and as a singer. She also did some really very special work down at the time of 9/11 at Pier 94, arranging for some 400 treatments to be taking place among the victims of 9/11 as well as the responders. This was a very tragic and traumatic time, of course, for all of us New Yorkers when all of that happened. And Rona was one of those people who kind of stood up and took action. And that's the kind of woman she is, and helped hundreds and thousands of people actually as a result of her efforts. So Rona Allen is part of this roundtable. Also, Nilima Bhat, who is a holistic health and transitions coach, and with her husband Vijay, who is also with us, both from Bangalore, India, in the United States for just a couple of weeks. And we're very pleased to have them here on A Better World. She has been doing some very powerful work with her husband in Bangalore, working with people who have had cancer and other illnesses, but a focus on cancer because of what her husband Vijay went through, and we'll get to that in a moment. She is herself certified as a teacher, yoga teacher, at International Shivananda Yoga Vedanta Center and the Srima School of Transformational Yoga. She has formulated her own way, her own synthetic approach called I Am Yoga and Meditation Practice, which I hope we hear some about. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a blend of the wisdom traditions East and West. And she has also done teaching at Integral Yoga of Sri Aurobindo. And that's of particular interest to me, so I really look forward to learning more about that. Sri Aurobindo is truly one of my real heroes on so many levels. I think he's a truly gifted man and, in a sense, an unsung hero for the genius that he really actually embodies, mm-hmm. or embodied. So Nilima also has a background in a bachelor's of science in life sciences and biochemistry, and she's done a lot of work both academically as well as professionally in the field of holistic health. Now, her husband is also a very interesting gentleman. He is additionally a transition coach now, but he has an extensive background in advertising, far away from where he is now. He worked for some 21 years with Ogilvy and Mather, the very well-known advertising agency. He lived in Mumbai, Bangalore, Singapore, London, and Hong Kong, working with major corporations and leading brands around the world. His last assignment was in Ogilvy's Asia Pacific board as regional strategy director overseeing corporate strategy. And now, well, after a life transition of your own, Vijay is now doing a lot of coaching, strategic consulting, leadership development, yes, for corporations, but also for people, both of them together, working with people who have been diagnosed with cancer and no doubt other illnesses as well, and help them get a handle on holistic, natural approaches to healing. So this is going to be the, you could say, the essence and the theme of today's show, talking about these things that differ tremendously from the Western medical approach, which has its place in the world. Usually, I like to say in the domain of energy medicine. Oh, that will be the day. And we're working on that. But in the domain of emergency medicine, yes. Western medicine is utterly exemplary. You know, when it comes to degenerative illnesses and such things as cancer or MS or even arthritis, it seems to falter. And that's where the indigenous medicines of old, what we call alternative medicines, which are only alternative because the AMA hasn't embraced them. Otherwise, they would be mainstream, mm-hmm. Really show a lot of power. And on that note, I'd actually like to turn to you, Vijay, and just ask, you went from being this corporate macher, as we say, a mogul of sorts, and going from that kind of position to having been diagnosed with colon cancer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you had the colon removed surgically?
That's right.
And then you were faced with the question of whether you were going to continue on with chemo and or radiation.
That's right. Chemotherapy was the option that was provided to me.
How creative. Thoughtful. And
well,
innovative.
fortunately, there was an option because the option was not to take the chemo. And given my condition and given the medical prognosis, I was very fortunate because the doctors gave me that choice. In most cases, certainly here in the United States or even back home in India, they may not have given me that choice.
Where was this that this happened then?
This happened in the UK when we were living in London.
Oh, I see. So there was greater freedom of choice.
That's right.
In the UK.
For this kind of prognosis, with the kind of statistics that they showed me, they did give me the choice. And when I made the choice, suddenly...
There was a round of applause.
Well, there was just actually deafening silence because Western medicine had done what it could. Now I was on my own when I decided not to take chemotherapy. And so then when we said, well...
By the way, you were on your own anyway.
I suppose.
Actually, it was the weirdest morning on Harley Street. I still remember that oncologist. He was so quiet, and his desk was completely empty, and he just sat there looking at us saying, well, if you take the chemo, you have a 30% chance of recurrence. And if you don't take it, then it's 32%. That's it. And then he just sat there.
How heartening.
So we said, well, for 2%, should we take the chemo? And he said, I don't know.
It's your choice.
Your choice. I said, what else do we do? I don't know. Your choice.
You know, I'm laughing a little bit and we're smiling because we're out of the woods, if you will. I mean, that was in 2001?
That's correct. The end of 2001.
So here we are a good 11 years later, which is a master number. I don't think it's insignificant that we are now sitting down on such a day.
Yes.
But so we can afford some laughter, and probably at the time, if it was able to muster some laughter, you would be even healthier. But, that's asking a lot of a human being, so please understand. But it's also interesting, the view, which is that we are statistics.
Yes.
We're not actually human beings. We're human doings and machines that can simply be statistized, if you will, quantified.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they could have had a guy on a videotape after, 10 patients coming in one after the next, and they play the same video. Well, you have colon cancer. Next, you have colon cancer. 30%, 20%.
Yes.
So, the doctor in your case was operating as some sort of droid, so to speak, because he's doing that all day. And after a while, they themselves become anesthetized to humanity.
Yes.
And that's very unfortunate in our society.
One of the things that we found was that the Western medical establishment focuses on cancer as an organ-centric disease. They talk about cancer of the colon, cancer of the breast, cancer of the lung, cancer of the liver.
Compartmentalized.
Exactly.
Organ-specific.
Yes. Whereas when you start to look at cancer as a person-specific disease, then you have to take the whole person into account, and that's what we really had to do after we decided to not take chemotherapy.
So what did you do? That's a very excellent point, and I think it's way too underestimated how important it is, because it is the basis of the work that we all do here at this table, which is holistic in nature. That
Exactly.
means systemic.
Yes.
It means inclusive of the being and his or her environment, all the way up to the far reaches actually of the cosmos.
Yes.
So that's why our spiritual backgrounds respectively is every bit as important as any kind of formal academic training and healing that we might have gotten.
Absolutely.
So what did you do, Vijay, at that moment when you said thank you but no thank you?
So what we did was we first went to Nilima's yoga center, and we said
Shivananda Center in
London, and we said, well, we've decided against chemotherapy, but we'd like to do something to minimize the chances of recurrence. So what do you advise?
In fact, the reason we went there is the minute we said, look, Western medicine has just thrown its hands up and we're on our own here. I said, it's not the only medical system in the world. There is something called Ayurveda, and, let's start there. And when we went to the yoga center looking for an Ayurvedic approach to cancer, we were surprised that they pointed us towards a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner who they knew well and highly recommended because he was getting great results with even, completely written off cases. So
In fact, they specialize in those.
Yes. And
so you went for acupuncture, herbs?
Yeah, so it was interesting that when we sat across this doctor, the kind of questions he asked were not questions that had come up in my treatments and surgery, oncology. He asked about digestion. He talked about the fact that perhaps my kidneys were not functioning so well. And he said, look, I'm going to give you some herbal medicines that are going to be like chemotherapy, but accepting that they are herbal. I'm going to give you some acupuncture because I want your immune system to come back to normal. And so we suddenly understood that the Chinese approach was indeed a holistic approach, and pretty much that's what we were looking for. So I took Chinese medicine for about 2 or 3 years quite regularly, both in London, and then when we moved to Hong Kong, I took that in Hong Kong as well. When we moved back to India 7 or 8 years ago, we discontinued the Chinese medicine because we didn't really find Chinese medicine practitioners in India. And instead, I moved to an Ayurvedic regime.
Yes, when in Rome.
Yes,
or I should say, when in Bangalore.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. By the way, if you hear me lapse into English Hindi, just understand I'm part Indian. Okay? And it happens, and I have no control over it. Okay, so please indulge.
You got to nod your head at the same time.
That's right, exactly. I know that very well. I've been to India several times, and I adore it. So understand, it's in my blood. So this is interesting. As an acupuncturist, having studied Chinese medicine here in the United States, in New York and Connecticut for years, I totally appreciate the wisdom of the approach, and having done Tai Chi. In fact, I was just teaching Qigong to mixed cultures just this weekend at Shivananda Yoga Ashram upstate in the Catskills.
Wow.
That's what I was doing, as well as something called therapeutic theater. And the yogis love Qigong.
Yes.
Just, because it's very complementary,
yes.
Rona, you have had an entire wealth of experience dealing with patients with cancer over the course of years. What is it that you do? How is it that you approach this issue?
Well, I go from the perspective of what the person brings to me. What is their life story? What is their life history? Why did they arrive to me on that particular day? Obviously, they're very troubled because they've come to me for advice. So my job is more of a coaching one in nature, and I get them to where they actually need to be. So sometimes it is Chinese medicine. Sometimes it's chiropractic. Sometimes it's yoga nidra. Sometimes it's something, go for a walk in the park. I was presented with a case just last week. Female patient came to see me. Every week she was steadily losing 5 pounds. She went to her medical...
A lot of people would be happy with that.
She's wasting away. She wasn't.
Oh,
she went from
different.
150 pounds to below 100 in less than a year, record time.
Yeah.
Could not find anything on the blood report. No, nothing on x-rays, nothing on MRIs, no history of anything really. What we found out is that she had a trauma, an emotional trauma, and it was so devastating to her. Actually, she had 2 traumas. 1, she retired. 2, she was missing someone very, very much who had gone away for a short period of time. No one discovered that. But by sitting with her and talking to her and examining her case history and just letting her express herself, we found out what her issues were, where she needed to go, and what she needed to embrace in her life to heal herself. Since then, I guess it's maybe 7 to 10 days, we're up 5 pounds. We're not losing anymore.
Wow.
Which is huge. And I think in a lot of cases, people need to express themselves. They need to hear themselves so they can figure out for themselves with someone listening what is wrong with them. And I think that's what you encountered with your Chinese medical practitioner, because they took you into account. You just were not another colon.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. Did she have breast cancer, by the way?
Her medical doctor gave her intense antibiotics, told her it was one of 2 things, cancer or parasites that were eating her away. It seems interesting. It seems logical, but there was nothing on the blood report. Healthy woman, exercises.
Did you have live blood cell done as well?
Everything. Nothing came out.
Really? Did it show blood aggregation?
Nothing.
Nothing.
And then he said, well,
was she visibly unhappy?
Well, that was when she presented herself to me. She didn't look particularly unhappy. She looked worried and concerned about her own condition.
Stress and anxiety.
Yes. And upon further investigation, we found those two issues, retirement. If a person that works their whole entire life is used to going with people and seeing people on a daily basis.
Sure.
Now she's stuck. She has no one to talk to. Her doctor gave her those two diagnoses. The problem is, you tell someone they have cancer, even if they don't have cancer, autosuggestion, the mind will start to work the cancer and create a cancer.
Exactly.
And that's not so good.
This is a beautiful point that you've made here, Rona, and my approach as a holistic psychotherapist and acupuncturist, but I focus on the psychological and emotional. Some years back, as Rona knows, because she attended some of the seminars, I brought a body of work here that I mentioned to you when you were still in India, called Total Biology, which is the work of an MD, an enlightened MD, a Moroccan-born Jewish physician, actually, who is also a Kabbalist. So you already see that he has a broader way of seeing life, named Dr. Claude Sabat. And he, based on the work of Dr. Hammer, the German New Medicine, which you may or may not know, but it understands that all cancer and all illness, actually, has an emotional stress root. And depending on what organ it is, it will say something about the nature of the emotional trauma, and the conflict at hand. And we also look at things both on the horizontal plane, if you will, as well as on the vertical plane. In other words, looking at the ancestors and who had what. And it's quite a map, actually. It's rather mathematical in nature. So you've got the qualitative, the feeling content that you were speaking of, Rona, of this particular patient, and you've got the quantitative of where someone fits into an entire sibling arrangement. Are they number one or number two or number three? And what is the relationship, of course, with mother, father, aunt, uncle, cousin, and with the grandparents, and things skip generations, and it's fascinating. There's something called the magic square, which a psychotherapist in France developed, which helps to elucidate all of us. But rather than going into that direction, just come back to your very insightfully identifying these as traumas, because they truly are. When somebody makes an identity change, like you said, from being in the world, at the job, dealing with people, being seen a certain way, and then all of a sudden not, it's traumatic, and they have to deal with so much. Cancer is actually, from a point of view of total biology, a solution. It's not a problem. So I want to bring to bear in what I'm saying here, my piece in this is the power of language. And you hit upon that. And in total biology, we say that the most dangerous illness is the diagnosis. That's the worst part of the whole thing. When someone is in the vulnerable position with somebody who's wearing a white coat and is imbued with such authority, and they are told that they have cancer. It's like a death knell because of the society that has set up the energy field around the word, when the word is just a word. And, in astrology, Cancer is someone who's born between certain dates in July. It's not a bad thing. I've known some wonderful, very lovely Cancers in my life. I'm making fun because that's the healthy way to
take it on.
Exactly. We all know Dr. Patch Adams, right? And playing with, and neuro-linguistic programming. You know how we can expand an idea and we can contract an idea. An emotion, it can be, we can expand fear or we can contract it. It's very interesting when you bring the mind to bear on the body, which is the game that we're all playing.
I was with a colleague just a few days ago, and he is a medical doctor trained in former Yugoslavia, and now he's working here as a naturopath. And he said during his training, we never told the family or the patient that the person had cancer. He says, we said he was just sick. He said, things were formed many years later, but he says, we wouldn't do that. He says, because when people hear that word cancer, if they have any chance, it kind of squashes it because they become so fearful and so anxious, and all their stress chemicals start working, there's no healing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well,
that's so strong.
That works both ways, funnily, is what we discovered. One, of course, is the risk that it'll be a death knell and the autosuggestion and the fear will step in. But it can also work the other way, that if there is a meaning to the cancer, which comes as a wake-up call, this is your mortality at stake here.
Yes.
Sometimes knowing that is important.
The thing that switches on the light.
And suddenly, death focuses life, because you're like, there's no more time to be fiddling around doing this, scenic routes and things like that. I've just got to get on with what I'm here to do. It works both ways.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I agree with you. I think we all need to take our mortality seriously and work towards our own health every moment, including now. I think so. A lot of us are very unaware of that final date, the expiration date that's going to come.
Yes.
And we just kind of flounder through life without really just releasing the negativity, focusing on the positive, looking at what we have as opposed to what we don't have, letting go of the things we don't need, we don't use, paring down, and just really focusing on loving each other, celebrating life.
Yeah.
And so, Rona, what's interesting is that, the death sentence or the death knell part of cancer, in a way, can also be looked at as cancer resetting your clock to zero. You start all over again. All your assumptions, everything that you had done before, you just have to let go of completely. And you then have to make the choice of what should be the quality of my life from here on, from this point on. And one of the things that we've seen in our work, and we were talking about how society looks at cancer, is that society is so preoccupied with the quantity of life. In other words, how much longer do I have to live? And not at all focused on the quality of life. And so in our work, what we try to do is to get our clients to see that cancer is really resetting to zero. And then to say, from here on, what is it that you want to do? What kind of a life do you want to lead? And how are you going to significantly improve the quality of your life? Because there is research which is now showing that when people focus on the quality of life, the quantity of life somehow increases. But when we are only focused on the quantity of life, it may not do much to the quality. So that is a key piece, I think, that you just pointed out.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And that can be extended, that as a metaphor for all aspects of our lives.
Yes.
We're always thinking quantity. In fact, there's a brilliant book written by a French scholar whose name is escaping me, but I do remember the name of the book, which is called The Reign of Quantity. Mm-hmm. And it's all about how our minds in the Western world especially, but not singularly, have been so focused on quantity that we've lost the joie de vivre of life. We've lost that celebration, Rona, you're referring to. And it's like every day is a celebration. I met someone recently who said, how are you? He said, well, the fact that I woke up and and I wasn't 6 feet under was a reason to celebrate. That's an interesting way of looking at it. He's totally right, Let me let everybody know that you are listening to Mitchell Rabin on A Better World Radio on Progressive Radio Network. And we are seated today with a roundtable talking about health and healing and in general, as well as looking at the subject of cancer and alternatives to cancer treatment in particular. And we're seated here with Dr. Rona Allen, as well as Nilima and Vijay Bhat, who are here from Bangalore, India, and Rona from New Jersey.
Actually, New York City thing.
Originally, yes. That's right. You're taking a vacation in New Jersey. The larger tri-state area is really the fairer way to put it, yeah. And if you do not get the newsletter just yet, please go to www.abetterworld.tv, abetterworld.tv, and get on it so you can know who's going to be on what shows as the week goes on, both the radio and TV shows, which we have every week. So, this is all very engaging, and I'm very much enjoying the repartee here because it's very rich and it's got a lot of depth to it. And people listening can feel assured, actually, simply by listening, because we're taking what is an extremely serious subject as it's projected by most airwaves, mainstream media, television, everything, film. And we're bringing a little intelligence, I'd say, and awareness to the subject and giving it a little space around it so people can kind of say and think the word cancer and not like die on the spot, but rather, breathe with it and say, there's hope. And your life, actually, Vijay, is a beautiful example of it. And I watched your YouTube thing, by the way, and very well done. And I would say that there are actually a great number of people who, when they avoid the standard medical approach, are tending to live longer and healthier. And yes, indeed, and credit needs to be given. People who have a belief system, and I know this will touch a button for us all, that the allopathic approach is the approach for them, can live an absolutely abundant life, going through radiation, chemo, and surgery. My father is an example of it. I brought him through a number of interesting, fascinating alternatives when he had gotten diagnosed with prostate cancer some years back, and he was really a trooper. His son, the therapist, the acupuncturist, how was he going to avoid trying some alternatives? It wasn't in the cards. But when it came down to it, they had whatever good effect they had. But he wasn't out of the woods because, as you all can attest, it takes a lot to get out of the woods, typically.
Yes.
I don't want to even set that up as a necessary point, but it usually does. And he decided at the end of the day he wanted to go to Yale New Haven Hospital and get an oncologist and go through a certain more standard treatment. And he did, and he had my full backing, and he went through it, and he had a tremendous amount of love from his family and from his wife, and he got through it with flying colors to this day. Many, many years later, he is just fine. So
yes, there are many cases like that.
There are many cases like and that. I attribute that, if asked, not to the value of chemotherapy, but to the belief system underneath the relationship of the patient to the doctor and medical authority. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would actually say that one of the things that perhaps the Western medical system ignores or even neglects is the active participation of the patient in his or her own treatment. In other words, it's possible for a patient to be just passively receiving the drugs or receiving the radiotherapy. But if it is possible for the patient to do something mentally, emotionally, psychologically, that can perhaps enhance the effect of the medication, or that can perhaps minimize
or neutralize the toxicity.
Side effects, the toxicity of the medication. And basically just the simple thought that the patient actively participates in the treatment as he or she is receiving the treatment is a really powerful resource that I think is being missed.
Yes.
In fact, to add to that, I fully agree that the belief the patient has in the medical system and his doctor is, in a way, half the battle won. And then how can we further build on that? Many of our patients, we simply give them a visualization technique that while they are under the chemo, just imagine this amazing medication that it's taking away all the bad stuff and it's leaving all the good cells intact. And, we kind of really work with that belief that this medicine that's coming through my veins right now is doing the best possible work it can for me. And they seem to do fine.
Yeah.
So
I think in a lot of cases, the patients need advocates.
Yes.
They need good family support. They need maybe a community center or a holistic practitioner that can take that part, because where we are in our Western mindset, it's very difficult to get that in when the doctor only has 2 minutes with a patient and he's on to the next one and the next one, or she's on to the next one. So it's very important that the patient finds a community, a group, a center like yours where they can go to and get that nurturing, get the support, get the ideas. Because sometimes it's not that they're unwilling, they just don't know how.
Quite right.
Very true. Rona, you bring a whole other type of modality to the table as well. We're speaking about the psychological and the emotional, which I think is really the undergirding of illness altogether, dealing as I do with psychology and emotional stress and remediating these and resolving them. And you also bring the nutritional approach and the entire idea of detoxification as well. Could you talk about that and what you see? It's so interesting because on one hand, this is all so very real, and we've all seen results with our clients. And at the same time, we also know that there's an alkaline, a pH issue here, and there's a detoxification issue. It's a whole different approach. And of course, I use energy medicine as well. So, wow. Well, it's like an abundance of embarrassment of riches.
Well, one of the things that I do in my practice, as I said before, I spend the time talking to the patients to find out which modality they need at that given time, that given moment. At my base, my core foundation, I'm a chiropractor. And the chiropractor the first chiropractor, D.D. Palmer, the founder of chiropractic, he said that dis-ease is caused by autosuggestion, toxins, and trauma. That's the root of all dis-ease. We're not necessarily talking about a named disease, but dysfunction, disease within the organism. So we review that to see what the person needs. Perhaps their digestion, as you spoke of earlier, is very stressed out. So maybe they need to go for colon hydrotherapy. Maybe they need a nutritional protocol. So many cancer patients have come in to see me. The doctor said, here, read this paper. This is what I'm supposed to eat. This is what I'm not supposed to eat. On some cancer protocols, chemotherapy, maybe they can't have broccoli or spinach because of some chemical or sulfur or this, but the patient doesn't understand that. They're just given a piece of paper. So we go through an entire intake with them nutritionally to see where they're deficient. Is what they're having and eating interfering with their treatments? That's very basic. So that's on the nutritional level. I also believe in the life system, the HEB. I think it's a fabulous system because...
That's a system, biofeedback that I use.
Right. Because it gives the opportunity for that discussion. So before anything, before massage, before yoga, before acupuncture, before even Chinese medicine, we have to first figure out what are they lacking, what do they need, what will help them most in that moment, along with whatever protocols they've come to me with.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So you're so much saying one size does not fit all, but everything is custom designed, if you will, per person.
It has to be.
It has to be.
Of course it does.
Could I take a moment to explain how we
Absolutely.
arrived
Please
at this
do.
after 10 years? We realized exactly like you said that something works for someone and something else works for someone else. So how do you put it all together? Our route has therefore been psychoneuroimmunology, basically saying the body is a self-healing system. Cancers are regularly produced, but immunity knows how to flush it out. So what compromised the immunity? Can we get at that? And if we can weed out the stressors that compromise the immunity, then the self-healing system kicks back and your body will not have the recurrence after you've gone through your treatment. So looking at stress in this kind of 5-pointed way, physical stress, and which is the diet and, the detox that's needed. So that's kind of fully covered through either Ayurveda or Tibetan medicine or homeopathy, because as you would know, there is the Nadi Chikitsa, the pulse, looking at the constitutional imbalances, the Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and so on. So
in Ayurveda.
Yes. So through that, the nutrition is also provided to bring the body
to match it.
Exactly, so that the detox is happening through nutrition, as well as bringing the whatever the body requires back into balance. So that's looking at it at a physical level, and of course exercise and so on. But then we also look at emotional, mental, systemic, and spiritual stressors. So suddenly you have an entire map of this person. We've created our own holistic health questionnaire, which takes about 30 minutes to fill. And it's like that intake you were talking about. And you very quickly get these red flags, and this is the map of this person. What are the red flags physically, emotionally, mentally, systemically, spiritually? Now as a coach, you can go in very quickly, and someone may need to go see the nutritionist very soon. Someone may need to go see the hypnotherapist and work out some deep childhood trauma. Someone needs to go do a family constellation therapy because there's all this family stuff, unresolved issues going back in the lineage. Some person may have lost contact with their spiritual source and really needs to reconnect with meditation or prayer or something. So it's very interesting how through this holistic health questionnaire that we developed, you can tailor a treatment plan which is very integrative. Do you want to add?
Just to say that two people may have colon cancer, but their regimes may be completely different. And that is not something that you're likely to see in the traditional way of dealing with cancer.
That's not correct. You will never see it.
That's right.
And I say it that way. To tell you the real truth, we're way too benevolent when it comes to understanding the Western medical approach. Now, I'm not going to get on a bandwagon here, but I really want to make the point that we're all intelligent people, and doctors tend to be highly intelligent people too. So I always wonder why they don't use their brains. Because they really don't. They're conformist. They're basically a lot more like sheep. And it's very sad and it's very unfortunate because they do not think about all of the basic points we're making. And I dare say these are basic, fundamental, intelligent, human, logical conversations that we're having here. And any doctor is well able to have this kind of inner thought process. Mm-hmm. Now, thank goodness, there are those doctors like Dr. Mercola or Julian Whitaker, Dr. Oz, who are absolutely out there, Dr. Jonathan Wright, that are on the cutting edge, and they are outspoken about the foolishness that gets passed off as medicine, and it's not medicine. It's actually harmful and dangerous. It's the opposite. It's toxic. And I just think that we want, as practitioners, to be really clear, to give credit where credit is due, please, but also to levy the critique that needs to be done to upgrade the entire conversation. Rona, what do you have to say about that?
We spent some time talking about the Western medical model. I think we need to get back to talking about the patient and how to empower that person. Vijay, I was very happy when you said you made a decision. You were given a choice, though. I would like the patient, well before they're given any choices, to know how to handle themselves. It's their body, it's their mind, it's their soul. So my job is to empower them, to show them that there are options, and they have within themselves the ability to heal and make the right decision for themselves. Because one route for somebody may be chemotherapy, and as you said, preparing them for that, talking to them in the right way. But they need to be empowered and understand it's their choice. They don't have to follow like sheep.
Yes.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you're coming around, Rona, to make the good point that education, that's what I keep hearing reiterated here in this roundtable. Education of the patient on so many levels. Choice, not choice. Having made a choice to go alternative as you did, what are my choices there? Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, Tibetan. There's Talmudic medicine, by the way. There's Egyptian medicine. There's shamanic medicine.
Yes.
There's the herbs in the backyard that our grandmothers in Europe knew,
Yes.
that your grandmothers in India and
Yes.
Dominican Republic and everywhere.
Yes.
It's just this ancient, actually largely feminine wisdom that has been passed on not only, but largely grandmother to mother to daughter. And there's this ancient chain, an ancient lineage, an oral tradition of wisdom around healing. Because who is the great healer of the family? Who picks up the baby at night when it has colic or what have you? Of course, it's the mother. The father does his piece, but it's really the mother, you know, from the milk of the breast all the way through. So it's kind of inherent, you know. I'd like at this point to perhaps hear a story or two of healings that have taken place through, Rona, if it would start with you, of a story of your client or two that you have felt particularly good about, whether it's cancer related or not, just with your alternative approach.
I have one particular client in mind. She's now deceased. I worked with her for about 10 years. She came to me around 2000 with breast cancer and a hip replacement in a wheelchair. She was very frail, barely 80 pounds. And she didn't know what to do with herself. And they were going to remove her breast, and they found a spot on her lung. And we looked at the x-rays together, and I said, yeah, there's a spot there, but wouldn't you think that if there's a problem in the breast, in the lymphatic system of the chest area, wouldn't you think maybe there's a little congestion in the lung because maybe there's something going on in another tissue? So we worked with that for a while. Turned out she did not have lung cancer. She only had a small tumor, cancerous tumor in her breast. She had that tumor removed, and that was it. Her doctor had told her in 2000 that maybe she had less than a year if she didn't go through all the treatments, and she had less than a year if she didn't go through all the treatments because she was frail. Those are that's no choice there. So she decided to pursue the whole gamut of alternatives. And I feel good today in saying we did a lot of things together. 10 years of working with her to the point, I mean, she died in her 80s, and that was her choice. So that was really, you know, for me, that's a good case, even though it has the inevitable ending.
Yes.
So by putting her through a nutritional regimen, chiropractic regimen, colon therapy, HEB life systems, psychology, psychotherapy, you name it, we did it all in that, and we were able to extend her life to 10 really quality years. She got to see 3 grandchildren, which is huge.
Oh, was this the patient that you referred to me as well?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah. We did a series of life sessions, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were very helpful to her.
Yeah, I know.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
And it actually helped her make a decision, her final decision. She got herself in order and together, and she made up her mind when it was time for her to leave, basically.
Yeah. That's a whole other really interesting realm about the choice we make actually to finally let go. That's its own roundtable, actually. But yeah, that's still very important, that it's within our own domain to have the thought process that brings us to that moment of that level of letting go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
So I'm thinking about 2 different kinds of stories. One was a young man, IT professional like many in Bangalore, young wife, young child, and cancer of the tonsils. And he came to do my cellular healing meditation, this technique that I have devised, that I've mentioned in my website.
Yes.
Cellular healing using a bunch of things put together, including how to breathe and how to use certain affirmations and visualizations, and there is a yantra that you use along with that. And you really kind of focus the entire...
Define that for our audience.
A yantra is a sacred geometry symbol that helps anchor the psyche, that helps organize the psyche, and that helps, in a way, activate and align the healing energies that are dormant. It awakens those healing energies. So these are like consciousness gateways.
Yes.
As you look at them.
That's beautifully put.
Yes, thank you. His word, consciousness gateways. I just got that from him a few days ago, Vijay's word. So he did this for 21 days, and he was so taken with it because as a meditation, it takes about an hour to do, and it puts you in such a state of being at peace no matter what. Now, you just are okay with whatever life is going to bring you. And he'd get into that state, and he did that for 21 days. And he was due to go, these were stage 4 tumors. He was supposed to go for surgery. And just before the surgery, the doctors ran a PET scan, and his tumors had disappeared. So he didn't need a surgery.
That's fabulous.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So, of course, he did lots of other stuff as well. But he wrote to me and he said, I believe it was that, the meditation and my belief, and, I really believe that's what brought it all together for me. So that's one case I feel really good about. The other is an ongoing case right now. Young lady, advertising professional, very good, very successful, wanting to be super successful at work, and now breast cancer with a little bit on the liver. And it may go anyway, we don't know. But now that we've started coaching her, she came over home the other day, and she's looking radiant. She's doing the cellular meditation. She's got her diet. She's a full vegan. She's taken salsa dance classes, and she's healed her relationships with her husband and her daughter, and on every front, physical, emotional, mental, systemic, spiritual, the coaching that we do, she's just taken it on. She's really used cancer as this wake-up call to just go for it and to really live her life and to tick all the boxes, leave no stone unturned. She's at the place where her quality of life is so good now. She says, I'm feeling much better than I did before the cancer. And I have every reason to believe she'll be fine. And even if she isn't, we're all going to die one day. So she's just in such a good place.
Go out celebrating and laughing. Yeah.
Yes, just live your life. And she's living.
Live your life.
It's the peak, she's living life at its peak. What more do you want?
You were speaking about something. Thank you very much for that, Nilima. You said something earlier, Vijay, about it being a reset point. And I'd like to hear you speak a little bit more about that, because there is clearly this existential moment when someone is given that because of the charge of the word. What we're saying here on one level is use the power of that delivers. On one hand, we're making the point that the use of the word to a patient can be the death knell, yes, but you well made the point that it can have the opposite effect too. I think you have to play with it sort of like a basketball, and just dribble it until it loses its power, as a word, as a death knell. But then you've got just a word and the existential reality that, they say, I could die from this. Well, I could die from anything, but right now they say I can die from this. And so let's take a look at it and use it wisely to either enhance my life, or like a reset button you were talking about, or shall I just kind of tell a different story, as you were talking about earlier, Rona? Because in a sense, we're always rewriting our story, and we can write whatever one we want. So why not write a really good novel, a novel? But could you talk a little bit about that idea?
One of the things we've come to realize is that all of us human beings have a very comforting notion of what normalcy is. And even if our lives go through these small ups and downs, we have a general sense that, okay, my life is like this, and this is what I consider normal. Now, when a cancer diagnosis is given to you, it just punches a hole through this normalcy completely. And of course, it puts you in touch with your own mortality. But apart from that, you're running around, you're getting tests done, you're in surgery, you're in hospital, you're getting treatments, you're not going to work, your family life is completely different, your diet has changed. So actually, in the short run, nothing is normal. Now, even when you start...
It sounds like a good thing.
When you start coming back, you realize that all your previously held notions of how long you might live, the plans that you had for the future, your children's education, the thought that you might want to hold your grandchildren, all of those things, now there is a big question mark. And the difficulty is that you don't know what the future is going to bring. All you do know is that cancer is a deadly disease. Some people survive, but most people don't. And that's the truth. So what happens is that your sense of stability and security and normalcy has been shaken to such an extent that you really don't know what to do next. And therefore, what you do is you try to scramble for some notion of normalcy that you might have had. For example, you may go back to work because you feel that work is going to give you the normalcy. Or you might take up a hobby from before because that's going to give you the normalcy. What we try to say is that cancer gives you the opportunity of creating a new normalcy. And this new normalcy, you have the potential and you have the opportunity to create it.
On that note, we're going to have to leave it there and hope that everybody creates a new normalcy, whether they have a diagnosis of cancer or not. But it's according to a new level of awareness and commitment to life.
Yes.
I want to thank you all. Believe it or not, we're out of time. And I think that as healers, we need to learn how to manufacture more time. And that's one quantitative thing I want to add to our lives. Would you please give your website, please, Rona, or your phone number? So people can get in touch if they'd like.
You can reach me at 646-642-9997. And my final thought is celebrate life.
Hallelujah. Vive. Vive la vida. Give your email address, your website, so people can get in touch with you.
So Sampurna, that's www.sampurnah.com.
And www.cancerawakens.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to thank you all for your beautiful work, all of you. It's really a contribution to the field, and you're helping a lot of people benefit as a result of each of your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell, for having us.
Absolutely. So great to have you. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us. You can always reach me at 212-420-0800 and through www.abetterworld.tv. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.